Let's go first to Deven Ghelani, who's Director of Policy and Practice and was one of the architects of the Universal Credit Welfare System and regularly helps us with matters such as these. Good to have you on again, Mr. Ghelani. I don't know if you've had sight of these two front pages. I've done a sort of brief, précis reading of them. Your take on what you've heard so far. Good morning.
Yeah, I have had sight of them. I think I'm quoted in one of them talking about the problems of the...
excuse me.
And the problems of getting the assessments right, really. I think that's what the biggest challenge is, because right now you've got more or less a box-ticking system where people present what they are able to do and not able to do, and that may or may not get them onto the benefit, rather than what I think we should have and what the original intent was, which is a conversation around what's stopping you from reaching your full level of independence. Now, it's important to say, and you missed this out in the introduction, that you can get PIP in or out of work, so you can still move into work even if you are getting PIP, and it won't affect that. It's to deal with the additional costs of the disability. But you're right to say that it does imply that you're less likely to be able to move into work. And I think the conversation we need to be having with young people is what's stopping you from reaching your full potential, and anyone moving on to this benefit, whatever age you are, because the assessment applies across the board.
You are indeed quoted in the Times version, and I'm reading your quote now. Also in that particular newspaper, they talk about how systems work in countries such as the Netherlands, Australia, Denmark and Germany. Can we learn from some of those countries in your view?
I think we can, but I also think the challenges are very similar. So if you look at Germany, they're facing very similar challenges to the ones we are now, which is kind of more people becoming and in the Netherlands, as I understand it as well, of more people really struggling to move into work and becoming more, seeing a growth in the number of people claiming means-tested benefits too, and disability benefits as well. I think one thing just to recognise, Nick, is a conversation I had with the Times reporter was really made me think about the last decade. Mm-hmm. And when we're seeing young people move on to these benefits, the question I always ask is, could we have done something about it sooner? When they're at school or if they're facing anxiety. Now, I think, I don't know what we could have done in every single case, but I do think what we're seeing is partly the impacts of austerity and tighter budgets, both on the individual families, but actually also on the schools and the public services around them, because had they been able to help, and whether or not they would have, I can't say, but that's certainly one of the things we've heard from the front line over the last decade, is that actually the pressures people are facing right now, we know are going to cause problems later on. And part of me wonders whether we're seeing the impact of that coming home to roost, really, when you talk about these figures for teenagers.
In this sphere, how was PIP originally meant to work?
Replacing disability living allowance, essentially by changing the terms of how you're assessed for it. It's there to deal with the additional cost of disability, so that's the purpose of it. So what do you need? What level of support do you need in order to be able to help you to live independently? But fundamentally, it became it gets cash in your pocket, because the belief is that disabled people are better able to determine how to spend that money in order for them to live independently. I think one of the conversations that we're not having is, what support do you need to be able to live independently? Could we give you that instead as a one-off piece of support to help you to, if you're having difficulty washing, if you're having difficulty for young people, in this instance, if it's anxiety, cognitive behavioural therapy, could we put that in place so you can stay independent for longer? PIP is slightly different to the other health-related benefit on universal credit, which does say you're not able to, you don't have to look for work at the moment, because that's the level of disability you face. And I think that is where actually some of these problems lie, because we've effectively made it a binary system. You either can work or you can't work. There's no intermediate group where you need support, and we'll get you that support. And I think it was removed in 2017, actually, an intermediate award. And I think it's one of the things that's done more to push people onto the higher levels of support, because that intermediate level is no longer there.
Deven Ghelani, thanks as ever for appearing on the show. You're Director of Policy and Practice. You're one of the architects of Universal Credit.